The repair beacon pierced the silence of deep space, its unusual frequency pattern immediately catching James Harrison's attention. He lowered his coffee mug, dark liquid sloshing inside the zero-gravity container, and leaned toward the communications panel of his maintenance vessel, the wrench. "That's not a standard distress call," he muttered, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. After 15 years of deep space engineering work, James had encountered his fair share of unusual situations, but this signal was different. It pulsed with an almost musical quality, carrying harmonics he'd never heard in any human or known alien transmission. The signal originated from the edges of the Kuiper Belt, far from regular shipping lanes. James checked his ship's logs. He was the only registered engineer within several million kilometers. Whatever was out there, they needed help, and he was their only option. "Computer, plot an intercept course," he commanded, securing his tools and preparing for what could be a complex repair job. The wrench's engines hummed to life, adjusting their trajectory toward the mysterious signal. As he approached the coordinates, James's breath caught in his throat. The vessel before him defied conventional spaceship design. It resembled a massive crystalline structure, its surface rippling with patterns of bioluminescent light. The ship must have been at least 3 times the size of the largest human vessels, yet it moved with an organic grace that seemed impossible for its scale. His communications panel lit up with an incoming transmission. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Naira of the Zenorian ship Luminara. We require engineering assistance." The voice was melodious, carrying subtle harmonics that his translator struggled to process. "This is James Harrison of the independent repair vessel Wrench," he responded, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm a certified deep space engineer. How can I help?" A pause followed, longer than standard communication lag would explain. Finally, Captain Naira's voice returned. "Engineer Harrison, our biomechanical integration systems are failing. We've lost 60% of our primary functions. Are you familiar with quantum organic technology?" James smiled despite himself. While quantum organic tech wasn't common in human space, he'd spent years studying theoretical papers on it. "I've never worked on it directly, but I understand the principles. If you'll allow me to dock, I can at least assess the situation." Another pause. He could almost feel the uncertainty in the silence. "Granted," Naira finally responded. "Follow the guidance beacon to docking port 3. But be warned, Engineer Harrison, our technology is unlike anything you've encountered before." The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth, the alien ship's port adapting to accommodate his vessel's standard connection mechanism. As the airlock cycled, James double-checked his diagnostic tools and environmental sensors. The readings showed breathable atmosphere and standard gravity. At least they had that in common. The inner door opened to reveal a corridor that seemed alive. The walls pulsed with subtle patterns of light, and the floor beneath his boots had a slight give to it, like walking on living tissue. But what truly caught his attention were the 3 figures waiting for him. The Zenorians were tall, easily 3 meters in height, with proportions that seemed both elegant and alien. Their skin had a faint silvery sheen, and their movements were impossibly fluid. The central figure stepped forward, and James knew immediately this must be Captain Naira. "Engineer Harrison," she said, her voice even more impressive in person, carrying undertones that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. "Welcome aboard the Luminara. I am Captain Naira, and these are my chief engineers, Krell and Venna." James nodded respectfully, trying not to stare at their otherworldly appearance. "Thank you for allowing me aboard. Can you show me the affected systems?" As they led him deeper into the ship, James noticed how the corridor seemed to respond to their presence, the bioluminescent patterns shifting and flowing around them. The Zenorians moved with a grace that made him acutely aware of his own comparatively clumsy movements. "Our ship," Naira explained as they walked, "is a synthesis of organic and mechanical systems. The organic components grow and adapt, while the mechanical elements provide structure and control. Recently, the integration between these systems began to break down. They entered what must have been the engineering core, and James forgot his professional composure for a moment. The chamber was vast, filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. Streams of what looked like liquid light flowed through transparent conduits, and at the center, a massive column of swirling energy reached from floor to ceiling. "This is incredible," he breathed, already pulling out his diagnostic tools. "I've never seen anything like it." Krell, the taller of the two engineers, spoke for the first time. "Few humans have. Our technology is generally considered too advanced to share with younger species." There was a hint of superiority in his tone that James chose to ignore. As he began his scans, James noticed something odd. The energy patterns weren't chaotic, as he'd expect in a failing system. They were more like, "It's not failing," he said suddenly. "The systems are communicating, but they're out of sync, like musicians playing the same piece at slightly different tempos." Naira's large, iridescent eyes widened slightly. "You can see that?" James nodded, already formulating a plan. "I think I can help, but I'll need to understand more about how your systems integrate." And he added with a slight smile, "I might need to try some very human solutions to a very alien problem." The story was just beginning, and James Harrison had no idea that this repair job would change not only his life, but the relationship between humans and Xenorians forever. James stood before the pulsing core of the Luminara, his mind racing with possibilities. The ship's quantum organic systems were far more complex than he'd initially realized, but the underlying principles were beginning to make sense. It was less like fixing a machine and more like healing a living organism. "The integration patterns are fascinating," he said, gesturing to the holographic display he'd set up. "Your ship doesn't just combine organic and mechanical components. They're in constant dialogue with each other." Captain Naira moved closer, her tall form casting a subtle shadow over his workstation. "The Luminara is more than a vessel," she explained. "It's a living entity that chose to partner with us. The mechanical systems are meant to enhance its natural abilities, not control them." James nodded, making adjustments to his diagnostic algorithms. "That's why traditional repairs aren't working. You can't force the systems to align. They need to want to work together." He paused, looking up at Naira. "Can you tell me more about how the ship communicates with you?" Naira's iridescent eyes studied him for a moment. "The Luminara shares impressions, emotions, sometimes even memories. But lately, those connections have become strained." As if in response to her words, the lights in the chamber flickered, and a low vibration ran through the deck. Krell moved quickly to a nearby console, his long fingers dancing over the controls. "Another harmonic disruption," he reported, his tone tense. "The mechanical systems are trying to compensate, but they're only making it worse." James watched the energy patterns shift and pulse. Something about their rhythm seemed familiar. "It reminds me of feedback loops in old Earth audio systems," he mused, "when a microphone picks up its own output." Venna, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Explain this concept," she requested, her curiosity evident. As James described the principles of acoustic feedback, he noticed the ship's bioluminescent patterns changing, becoming more synchronized with his words. An idea began to form in his mind. "What if we're approaching this backwards?" he said suddenly. "Instead of trying to force the mechanical systems to match the organic patterns, what if we create a resonance that both systems can naturally align with?" Captain Naira's expression shifted subtly, the Xenorian equivalent of raised eyebrows. "How would you accomplish this?" James was already modifying his equipment. "We'll need to map the natural frequencies of both systems, find their points of harmony. It's like," he searched for an analogy they would understand, "like finding the common notes in two different musical scales." Over the next several hours, James worked closely with Krell and Venna, teaching them human engineering principles while learning more about Xenorian technology. The ship's response to their efforts was subtle but encouraging. the disruptive vibrations becoming less frequent, the energy patterns showing more stability. During a brief rest period, Naira brought him something that resembled food, crystalline structures that dissolved on his tongue, filling him with renewed energy. "You surprise me, Engineer Harrison," she said, watching him eat. "Most humans we've encountered view technology as something to be conquered and controlled." James smiled. "Maybe that's why they've never been invited aboard a ship like this," he replied. "Technology isn't just about making things work, it's about understanding them. Sometimes the gentlest solution is the most effective." As they talked, James noticed how the ship's lighting seemed to soften, creating an almost intimate atmosphere. The Luminara was responding to their conversation, perhaps even participating in it in its own way. He found himself sharing stories about his years as a deep space engineer, the strange phenomena he'd encountered, the lessons he'd learned about patience and adaptability. Naira, in turn, spoke of her people's journey through the stars, their gradual evolution from conquerors to explorers, and their partnership with the living ships that had transformed their civilization. Her voice carried subtle harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship itself, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls. "There's something I don't understand," James said finally. "Your technology is clearly superior to ours. You must have engineers far more qualified than me. Why did you accept my help?" Naira was quiet for a moment, her tall form perfectly still. "The Luminara chose you," she said simply. "When your ship approached, we felt its response. A recognition, an acceptance. Our ships do not make such choices lightly." Before James could process the implications of this revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The harmonious patterns they'd worked so hard to establish were suddenly disrupted, energy levels spiking dangerously. "Something's wrong," Krell announced, his usually calm voice urgent. "The mechanical systems are going into cascade failure." James rushed to his equipment, his heart racing. The readings were unlike anything he'd seen before. It was as if someone had deliberately introduced a virus into the ship's systems, one designed to destroy the very integration they'd been working to restore. As emergency containment fields sprang up around them, James met Naira's eyes. The situation had just become far more complicated than a simple repair job. Someone on board didn't want the Luminara to be fixed, and now they were all in danger. The ship shuddered around them, its living systems crying out in pain, and James knew they had precious little time to uncover the truth before the saboteurs' plan reached its devastating conclusion. The real test of human ingenuity, and the newfound trust between him and the Xenorians, was about to begin. The engineering core of the Luminara had become a chaos of flashing alerts and warning signals. James's fingers flew across his diagnostic interface, while Krell and Venna worked at their own stations, trying to contain the cascade failure threatening to tear the ship apart. "The virus is adaptive," James called out, watching as his containment algorithms were systematically dismantled. "It's not just attacking the mechanical systems, it's forcing them to fight against the organic components." Captain Naira stood at the central console, her silver skin reflecting the emergency lights. "Can you isolate it?" "Not conventionally," James replied, his mind racing. "But maybe." He hesitated, then turned to face her. "Captain, I need direct access to the Luminara's neural matrix." The request brought all activity in the room to a sudden halt. Krell stepped forward, his expression severe. "That's forbidden. The neural matrix is the ship's most sacred component. No non-Xenorian has ever." "Granted," Naira interrupted, her eyes fixed on James. The authority in her voice brooked no argument. James quickly connected his equipment to the neural interface, trying to ignore the weight of what he was about to attempt. The neural matrix was the living heart of the ship, the core of its consciousness. One wrong move could destroy everything. As he worked, he became aware of a presence, vast, alien, yet somehow familiar. The Luminara itself was reaching out to him, sharing its pain and fear. The virus wasn't just damaging systems, it was hurting a living being. "I need you to trust me," he whispered, both to the ship and its crew. Then he did something that made Krell gasp in alarm. He began shutting down the mechanical safeguards one by one. "What are you doing?" Vena demanded. "Without those safeguards, the virus is using them against us," James explained, not taking his eyes off his work. "It's turning the ship's own protections into weapons. Sometimes you have to be vulnerable to become stronger." As the safeguards fell away, James could feel the ship's consciousness more clearly. Its presence in his mind was like an ocean of thought and emotion, beautiful and terrifying. Together, they began to trace the path of the virus, following its digital trail back to its source. "There," James suddenly exclaimed. The virus was introduced through the auxiliary navigation system, but the signature, he frowned. "It's Cenorian in origin." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Naira's expression hardened. "Can you show me the exact access point?" James projected the data onto the main display. The signature was clear. Someone with high-level access had planted the virus, timing it to activate when the ship was at its most vulnerable. Section 12, Terminal 7. Naira Reed, her voice cold. "That's in the restricted research area. Only senior staff have access." She turned to Krell. "Who was on duty there during the last cycle?" Krell checked the logs, his movements sharp with tension. "Chief Researcher Zivler. But he's been with us for decades, Captain. He would never." A new alarm cut through the air. "The virus is mutating," James announced. "It's attempting to breach the containment fields around the quantum core. If it succeeded, the resulting reaction would tear the ship apart." They had minutes, maybe less. Naira's voice came through the ship-wide comm. "Security teams to Section 12. Detain Chief Researcher Zeller immediately." She turned to James. "Can you stop it?" James was already deep in the ship's systems, working with the Luminara's consciousness to fight the virus. It was like trying to conduct an orchestra while simultaneously composing the music, but he could feel the ship working with him, understanding his intentions almost before he formed them. "Almost," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just need to." There. The virus's attack patterns suddenly became visible in the neural matrix, not as code, but as discordant notes in the ship's natural harmony. James began to adjust the frequencies, not fighting the virus but transforming it, integrating its energy into the ship's own patterns. The effect was immediate. The warning lights began to fade, and the ship's normal bioluminescence returned. In the neural matrix, James could feel the Luminara's relief and gratitude washing over him like a warm wave. "Incredible," Vena breathed. "You didn't just stop the virus. You converted it into a strengthening agent for the neural matrix." Before James could respond, Naira's communicator chimed. "Captain," a security officer reported, "we've apprehended Zedlor. He was attempting to reach an escape pod. We found evidence of communication with an unknown vessel in the nearby sector." James disconnected from the neural matrix, his hands shaking slightly from the mental effort. Why would he do this? What could be worth risking so many lives? Naira's expression was grim. "That's what we intend to find out. But first," she turned to James, her tall form seeming to soften slightly. "You've done more than repair our ship. You've shown us that trust can transcend species barriers. The Luminara chose wisely when it accepted you." James looked around the engineering core, at the harmonious patterns of light playing across the walls, at the faces of the Zenorians who had become more than just colleagues. He had come aboard to fix a ship and found himself part of something far larger, a bridge between two civilizations. But as security teams continued their investigation, and as the mystery of Zaylor's betrayal deepened, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever forces had driven the respected researcher to sabotage his own ship were still out there, and they might not be satisfied with failure. The real question was, how far would they go to achieve their goals, and what role would James play in the coming conflict? James sat in Captain Naira's private chamber, a vast room where the walls shifted between deep blues and purples, reflecting the tension of their conversation. The interrogation of Chief Researcher Zedler had revealed disturbing information. A hidden faction within Xenorian society opposed to any cooperation with lesser species. They call themselves the Eternal Purity Movement, Naira explained, her tall form casting a long shadow in the dim light. They believe sharing our technology with other species will lead to our downfall. Zedler was their agent, tasked with preventing any possibility of humans learning our ship's secrets. James absorbed this information, running his hand along the living wall beside him. The Luminara responded to his touch with a soft pulse of light. But why now? Why risk everything with this attack? Because of you, James. Naira's iridescent eyes met his. Your success in integrating with our systems, your understanding of the Luminara, it proves their fears wrong. It shows that humans are ready for deeper cooperation with our people. Before James could respond, Venna entered the chamber, her movements urgent. Captain, we've received a transmission from the Earth Coalition. They're demanding to speak with Engineer Harrison immediately. The message played out in holographic form above Naira's desk. Admiral Bennett, a stern-faced woman James had met only once before, appeared before them. Engineer Harrison, your presence aboard the Xenorian vessel has not gone unnoticed. Given the strategic importance of this contact, you are hereby ordered to return to Earth with full documentation of their biomechanical integration systems. This technology could revolutionize our fleet. James felt his stomach tighten. They want me to steal your secrets, he said quietly after the message ended. And if you refuse? Naira asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Best case. I'm labeled a traitor, banned from space work forever. Worst case. They'll claim I've been compromised by alien influence and use it as an excuse for more aggressive actions against Xenorian ships in human space. The chamber fell silent except for the subtle harmonic hum of the ship. Finally, Krell spoke from where he stood by the door. There is another option. He looked to Naira, who nodded. The Luminara has chosen you, James, she said. Among our people, such a bond is sacred. We would welcome you as part of our crew, permanently. The offer hung in the air like a tangible thing. James stood and walked to the viewport, watching the stars wheel slowly past. Everything he'd worked for on Earth, his reputation, his career, all of it would be gone if he stayed. But the thought of betraying the trust of the Luminara and its crew, of becoming just another human seeking to exploit alien technology, was unbearable. The ship is dying, Venna added softly. The damage from Zedler's virus was more extensive than we first believed. It needs someone who can truly understand both its organic and mechanical aspects. It needs you. As if in response to her words, James felt a gentle brush against his consciousness. The Luminara reaching out, sharing its hope and fear. The connection they'd formed while fighting the virus had grown stronger, more profound. If I stay, James said slowly, I'll be painting a target on all of us. Both the Earth Coalition and your Eternal Purity Movement will see it as a threat. Naira moved to stand beside him, her height making him feel small yet somehow protected. Perhaps that is exactly what both our peoples need. Proof that cooperation is not just possible but essential. A alert chimed through the chamber. Captain, one of the bridge officers reported, we're detecting multiple ships entering the sector. Earth Coalition signatures. They're not waiting for my answer, James said grimly. Naira's expression hardened. Your presence here has forced both sides to show their hands. Now we must decide how to play them. She turned to face him fully. What is your choice, James Harrison? He looked around the chamber, at the living walls that pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, at the faces of those who had become more than colleagues. He thought of Earth, of the politics and fear that drove people to reject the unknown. Then he felt again that gentle touch in his mind. The Luminara, offering not just a job but a home, a purpose. I won't betray either of my peoples, he said finally. There has to be a way to build a bridge without burning everything down. He straightened his back, decision made. I'm staying, but not just as an engineer, as a mediator. someone who can help both sides understand each other. The tension in the room shifted to something else. Possibility, hope, determination. But before anyone could speak, the ship's alerts blared to life. Multiple weapons lock. Krell announced. The coalition ships are taking aggressive positions. James met Naira's eyes. The choice had been made, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold. Now they had to find a way to prevent two civilizations from falling into conflict and prove that understanding between species was worth fighting for. The Luminara's bridge hummed with tension as the Earth coalition ships maintained their aggressive stance. James stood beside Captain Naira, watching the tactical display where 5 human vessels formed a blockade pattern around them. "They're hailing us," Venna announced from her station. "Admiral Bennett is demanding our immediate surrender and the handover of Engineer Harrison." James stepped forward. "Let me speak to them." Naira nodded, and the holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Bennett's stern face. "Harrison, you're committing an act of treason. Stand down and return to Earth custody immediately." "Admiral," James replied, keeping his voice steady, "what I'm about to show you is worth far more than any stolen technology." He glanced at Naira, who gave a subtle nod. "Luminara, initiate shared consciousness protocol." The ship's neural matrix expanded, creating a telepresence field that enveloped the bridge. Through their quantum communications array, the field extended to the coalition ships. Suddenly, everyone, human and Xenorian alike, could feel the Luminara's living presence. "This," James said into the stunned silence, "is what true integration looks like. Not theft, not dominance, but partnership. The Luminara isn't just a ship with advanced technology. It's a living being that chooses to work with us." Through the shared consciousness, the coalition crews experienced firsthand a harmony between organic and mechanical systems, the deep bond between ship and crew. They felt the Luminara's pain from the recent attack and its hope for understanding between species. Admiral Bennett's expression shifted from hostility to wonder. "This is incredible," she whispered. "It's also just the beginning," Naira added, her tall form radiating authority. "We've been watching humanity's progress, waiting for the right moment to offer deeper cooperation. James has proven that our peoples can work together, learn from each other." As if on cue, the Luminara shared a vision through the neural link, a future where human and Xenorian ships worked together, where technology was developed through mutual understanding rather than competition. The possibility of it hung in everyone's minds like a tangible hope. But the moment was shattered by new alarms. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Krell announced. "Xenorian signatures. It's the Eternal Purity Movement." 3 sleek vessels appeared on the tactical display, their designs more aggressive than the Luminara's elegant form. "This ends now," a harsh voice transmitted across all channels. "We will not allow our sacred technology to be corrupted by lesser beings." James felt the Luminara's fear spike through the neural link, but also its determination. An idea formed in his mind. Crazy, dangerous, but possibly their only chance. "Naira," he said quickly, "the harmonic resonance we use to fight the virus, we can adapt it. Use the neural link to show both sides what's really at stake." Understanding flowed between them through the ship's consciousness. Naira began entering commands while James modified the quantum field generators. The Luminara, understanding their intent, began to sing. There was no other word for it. The ship's combined organic and mechanical systems generated a harmony that rippled through space itself. Through the shared consciousness link, every person on every ship experienced the music of creation, the fundamental rhythms that connected all living things. The effect was profound. The Eternal Purity Movement ships halted their attack run. The coalition vessels powered down their weapons. In that moment, artificial divisions melted away, replaced by a shared awareness of their common existence in the vast cosmic dance. "We are all part of the same story," James said softly, his words carrying to all ships. The universe isn't divided into higher and lower beings. It's a symphony where every voice matters. Hours later, as representatives from both sides met aboard the Luminara to begin formal diplomatic talks, James stood with Naira in the ship's garden chamber. Bioluminescent plants pulsed gently around them, and through the viewport, they could see the combined fleet of human and Xenorian ships floating peacefully together. "You've changed everything," Naira said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The Eternal Purity movement is fracturing, and the Earth Coalition is open to real cooperation. The bridge you wanted to build, it's already taking shape." James smiled, feeling the Luminara's contentment flowing through their shared bond. "We all did it together. That's the point, isn't it? No species has all the answers, but together." He gestured to where human and Xenorian engineers were already beginning to exchange ideas. "Together, we can reach further than we ever could alone." "And what about you?" Naira asked. "Will you stay?" James looked around at the living ship that had become his home, at the tall, elegant aliens who had become his family, and at the stars that held more promise than ever before. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied. "There's so much more to learn, to discover. And now," he grinned up at Naira, "now we have all of space and time to explore it together." The Luminara's lights pulsed in agreement, its consciousness embracing them both. As human and Xenorian ships prepared for their first joint mission of exploration, James Harrison, engineer, diplomat, and bridge between worlds, felt the future opening up before them like an endless frontier of possibility. It had all started with a simple repair job, but it had become something far greater, proof that when different species chose to trust and understand each other, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, beckoning them forward into a new age of cooperation and discovery. The end.